speaking to a man after the morning mass, and you'll know why he was saying this to me. He said, "Oh, I so love when you tell stories of your family." I said, "Well, I can only do it because they are an ocean away." But when I was growing up, I'm one of seven. I'm the youngest of seven, 5 boys, and we always shared rooms, and we had different configurations in my life. But I never had my own room until I went away to the seminary. And so I always shared with my brother Brian, no matter how we were living. But while I was in secondary school, Brian, Kevin, and I shared a big room. And Kevin was a little older than us. He was about 4 to 5 years older than me. And he still worked in town locally. He didn't go away to university or anything. And he was a golf course greenskeeper in nice weather and a ski instructor in winter weather. And he just would get up early, go to work, play golf and ski after work, and come home and go to bed. Now, that's all we thought about Kevin. But in fact, from the time he was about 17 years old, Kevin was an active alcoholic and drinking to the point of intense drunkenness almost every night. And he could make his way through life because he was a gentle, quiet drunk. And it didn't really impact others that much. And he was quiet, increasingly withdrawn, didn't say much. In fact, kind of was a little overwhelmed by those of us who could say a lot in life. And then one day he got help. He reached out for help. He was 21, 22 years old. Started going to AA meetings, did his 90 meetings in 90 days. Still goes to meetings either in person or online now, 7 days a week, most weeks. And he's been sober for 45 years. But the most amazing thing of the transformation, especially early on, is what happened to him. This quiet, withdrawn, almost reclusive young man just started talking. And it was like he was making up for lost years. And he had opinions about everything. And he thought we wanted to hear them. That's supposed to be funny. We didn't. One time, I remember one of my brothers, Kevin, was going on and on about something, and he looked at me and said, "Do you remember when he didn't talk?" Kind of miss those days. But he became a new person. He let go of brokenness and allowed healing to take root. And in some ways, you could say he was not just transformed, but transfigured, such that this person who would hardly speak at our table would go to AA conferences for young people and speak before thousands of people. An amazing, amazing renewal of life and transformation. And sometimes when we hear the Gospels, these scriptures on Jesus' transfiguration, it's hard to picture what went on, and we shouldn't assume it was just like the story I told, but we shouldn't assume it wasn't much like that. The people who were looking at him, Peter, James, and John, were in awe. As Jesus is transfigured and his clothing becomes as if lightning, and he's talking with the great patriarch of Israel and the major prophet. And they see in the person of Jesus the promise, the fulfillment of everything God had been telling his people for thousands of years. And they didn't really know what to do about it. But in a way, Jesus is personifying in time and place what we heard in our first reading of the Abrahamic covenant, where Abram, takes up God's offer and accepts him as his God. And all things are made new. Everything is transformed. The fullness of the future of a people so numerous as to be uncountable came to Abraham in that moment. And we are some of his descendants. We stand in that lineage of Abraham that flows also then through Jesus, who in his renewal of a covenant stands with his people in his very person and takes on our brokenness, our sin. He takes on our humanity personally, and he moves through it to new life and to real hope. And the thing that's important for us to recognize here at the beginning of this Lenten season, as it is each and every year on the second week when we hear one of the three versions of the Transfiguration, is that Jesus' Transfiguration isn't just an event in history. It is an invitation to each and every one of us to be transformed, to be transfigured, to allow ourselves to be so filled with God's grace, to allow ourselves to take those times and those moments that the church gives us and that we find in our own lives to honestly assess ourselves, not to beat ourselves up, but to recognize those places that are broken, those places we are in need, those tendencies we have to sin, however minor or however great, those inabilities we have to move past certain problems and difficulties and people, and to recognize that in ourselves, we're not whole yet, we're not complete. And in doing so, inviting God in to make that transformation in us. For isn't that what we hear from St. Paul in the letter to the Philippians today? That there are people in the community at Philippi who are not living the life. And the life isn't a strict sense of perfection. It's not recognizing that there are things they're doing and ways they're acting that aren't right. And they're deluding themselves. And that what we get each and every Lent is the opportunity to kind of blow ourselves open a little bit and to allow, if we allow it, God's grace to fill us and to transform us and to make us new, to take those things, those aspects of our being of which we're not particularly proud or perhaps are just coming to some deeper realization about, allowing God to make all things new. So that as we journey together as individuals and as a community of faith, we become ever more radiant with the love of God. We begin to shine forth ever more fully the light of Christ in our world. And our transfigured selves become signs of hope. That's what Easter is about. Yes, we live in the salvation of Christ already, but He is calling us to ever become the person He has called us to become His witnesses with our very lives, to become transfigured.